What's poppin', people? It's Dante, getting my morning started off here along the Schuylkill River. Yeah, I have to start my day off by the water. Such a beautiful place to be. I grew up here in Philadelphia, just a stone throw away, with this river in my backyard. Schuylkill meaning hidden creek, hidden river. The Lenape tribe, the original inhabitants of this land, lived in the Wissahickon, in the forest. And I'm sure that most of this area here in Philadelphia was green. Most of this area was covered by trees. And yeah, the Lenape tribe, you know, when I was a kid, when I was very young, me and my friends would go into the woods, into the unknown, exploring, building teepees with sticks, sharpening spears, pretending to hunt deer, attempting to hunt deer. You know, making bridges with stones, climbing trees, exploring caves. I remember discovering the totem pole, like these different things in these unknown, uncharted areas where, you know, hardly any people would go. I remember blazing my own path. I remember carving my own trail. Hey, look at this. They've got lights on the bridge finally. Let's make a new photograph. This is a surprise. You know, I can walk this same mundane lane every single day, but I'll always find something new to photograph. This is such a beautiful morning. I'm so glad to come here. I'm just grateful for this beautiful day. There's something new about this location right now with these lights. You know, I always knew they put the lights here. Just haven't seen them yet. Yeah, let's keep going. And so there's something about the water that's magnetic. There's something about this location, the Schuylkill River, that keeps me coming back out here, playing and exploring like a kid again. I'm in the mouth of a snake. You see the eyes? Yeah, maybe I should make a photo on this side too. Yeah, I think embracing danger is in my blood. You know, I have the blood of Achilles rushing through my veins. I've got the lust for battle. I have this insatiable lust for life itself. You know, when I'm reminded of my time as a child, I remember, you know, being a kid, you wouldn't really wear shoes. You know, you would sort of just go around and play in the grass and roll around. And yeah, when a kid comes out of the womb, you don't put shoes on the baby. Maybe little socks, kind of like these. Actually, I just ran into this guy in med school yesterday, Ken. Shout out to Ken. Yeah, he was telling me about these shoes. You know, he was like, oh, these are really good for your longevity. He's like, wow, if you're wearing these now at this age, at 28, could you imagine what it'll be like when you're older? Like, you'll be thanking yourself for wearing these. And honestly, I didn't really think too much about it, but it makes sense, right? We're so, you know, accustomed to these modern things, whether it's shoes, right? Think of the sole on your shoe and how thick it is. It's like wearing condoms on your feet, you know, you don't get to feel any of the sensation. Yeah, it's like condoms on your feet, and it just makes you weaker. So I believe that my feet strength have been increasing since wearing barefoot shoes. You know, the strength of my foot, the strength of my legs, and even my back, where my favorite lift is the farmer's walk, where I hold 2 heavy dumbbells and walk them out, because I believe that grip strength and posture are some of the most critical things when it comes to health and fitness. And so yeah, these shoes have been a great addition to the routine for like a year and a half now. There's something about sculpture when I look at this sculpture, Air by Walker Hancock, it inspires me. You know, there's something about a sculpture in the way it forces you to look up at it, and you see this beautiful posture, this beautiful pose. You know, Air, he's standing on top of the earth, he's standing on top of the cloud. You know, there's something about a sculpture that uplifts the human spirit to a new height, where I find sculpture and architecture to be some of mankind's greatest artistic achievements, and I find inspiration in these things. I'm reminded of my time in Rome this past year, looking at the sculpture of Achilles dying in the hands of Ajax, looking at the hero Hercules. You know, there's something about these myths, these stories, these heroes that shape our world and shape how we can go forward into a new ideal. And maybe this is something that's missing in culture, thinking of the Lenape tribe, you know, thinking of the tribe generally, right? Thinking of my time in the Peace Corps as a volunteer in Zambia, Africa, working with fish farming in rural communities off the grid. And so in a tribe, there is a hierarchy where we have God, the tribe, and the land, right? There's God, tribe, and land, or here in the United States, we have God, nation, and land, God, family, and land. And I think that there's something about this hierarchy that's missing in modern society. And so when I think of my upbringing, going to Catholic school from pre-K to grade 8, which I absolutely loved and I'm very grateful for, I feel like it shaped me into who I am today in a good and positive way. And yeah, we would wake up, go to class. The first thing we would do is recite the Pledge of Allegiance, right? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You know, one nation under God, indivisible, right? There's something about this hierarchy. And then we would go into prayer, right? And that's maybe a good thing at the end of the day. Like, there's something about prayer, there's something about this communal activity of prayer itself, where if you are in a church, you know, the people sing together, you know, recite hymns in Latin, you know, make sacrifices together, you know, come together as a community to make a sacrifice, to remind ourselves of the sacrifice made at the altar when we see the bread being broken and the wine or the blood of Christ being shared, right? You see these things in a community, like in Panta village in Zambia, Africa, right? When you are in these rural communities off the grid, away from modern society, you recognize these hierarchies, right? Where the mother is coming home in the morning with firewood on her head, babies on her back, right? The father, he's building homes and churches, right? That sacrifice being made by the parents. The boys are building bricks with sand and mud. The girls are sweeping the floors. The girls are preparing the food for the day. Everybody in the family, everybody in the tribe has a role to play. And in the center of the community, in the center of the village, there is a church, right? And at this church, in the center of the church, there is an altar, and that's where the sacrifice is made. That's where you're reminded of the sacrifice of Jesus, right? That hero, that ideal man to emulate. And I think that there is something about this notion of the sacrifice, this notion of the tribe and the community, that is lacking within modern society. And I try to remind myself of these things that I've learned over my journey from travel. And you know, while I'm very grateful for the modern amenities of the city of Philadelphia, you know, where I can go to the tap and I can turn on the faucet and get running clean water, right? A crazy thought is, could you imagine if somebody were to poison the well, right? If somebody were to poison our water source, the source of vitality, you know, this would be the quickest way to kill off a community. And you know, I say this lightheartedly and kind of jokingly, but also seriously, as water is what is needed. And so at the center of the community here in Philadelphia, we have City Hall, where the mayor presides. There's different courtrooms and things that go on there. However, before City Hall was constructed, the water pump was standing in the place of City Hall. And that water pump was necessary. That was needed to provide vitality to the community to even start a city like Philadelphia, right? And so when I was in the village, I'll never forget going to the well, drawing water, coming home with buckets on my head, you know, filtering it through a gravity filter, adding iodine, boiling the water, making sure it's clean, and then consuming the water, right? There's this whole routine when you're off the grid that requires much more work than just turning on the faucet, having clean water, and going on with your day, right? Where some families spend the entire day going to and fro because, you know, what I've realized is in the village, in these communities, in the tribe, most households have around 10 children per house. I mean, they're pumping kids out in these villages. And that's what I've recognized through evidence, through experience, right? They are coming together, they are forming families, and I believe that this happens under a church. It happens in a community, right? It's something that's lacking here, where I actually believe that there is some sort of population crisis, because if you observe the city, right, if you're just walking around with your eyes open, and not to mention, I think the city isn't the greatest place to raise a family. I think it should be. You know, I think that there is possibility where I've spoken with people of older age, right, in their late 70s or 80s, and they describe different neighborhoods, you know, like South Philadelphia, and how there was a candy shop, a laundromat, a tailor, you know, 300 families, 2 kids per family, like what, like there was always, or in the past there was this like tribe of South Philadelphia. There was this community of this sort of couple of blocks within a neighborhood. And maybe that's sort of lacking, where we have a disconnection from our neighbors, our community, our tribe. And that's a big freaking leap. Yeah, and so what are we to do about this? Oh, okay, so yeah, right, the population, right? So when you look around a city, for me, like mostly I'm seeing just dogs. I'm just seeing dogs on leashes. I'm seeing people with dogs and sunglasses on, you know, which sunglasses essentially are just saying, leave me alone, I don't want to talk. And we all have the right to do this. And AirPods. But the dog thing is particularly interesting because throughout my travels, you know, when I've observed dogs, you know, particularly in Palestine, they keep these dogs, and like this is the thing, I'm relating things from places that are far away from these modern luxurious places like the United States, so just bear that in mind. However, in Palestine, in Jericho, where I spent lots of time, where actually I studied in Hebrew University for 6 months. I traveled all throughout the different Palestinian cities. I returned, spent 3 months. I volunteered on a kibbutz in Israel, and also lived and volunteered with a Palestinian family in Jericho. I slept on the floors of mosques. I learned all about Islam, and was ultimately at the end converted, just out of my sheer curiosity, right? And so while actually I do still identify with my Catholic roots, I think that it is and was an interesting experience at the time. where these dogs in the village are used for security. They muzzle their mouths, they keep them in cages, they hardly feed them, and they leave them out at farms, they leave them out at the borders, at these places where they need protection, they need an alarm system, right? The dog is used in war. That's what I think of. Consider the myth of Hercules descending to Hades to then conquer Cerberus, and the three-headed dog. You know, there's something about dogs in modern world. It's just like this weird kind of like mushy gushy soft thing where we just treat them like babies. You know, you see them very often in shoes, in clothes, in strollers, and I think that there's like this natural inclination to even cook for the dog on the stovetop and treat it like a human, because we crave that sort of paternal connection to living beings, and we replace the baby with the dog. And that's my theory. I actually really do believe that, because when I'm walking around I see that. It's like I know, like I just see. And yeah, my time in Jericho, you know, that was particularly interesting, right? There was something about this trip I remember for a few months when I was in the mosque and I was praying 5 times a day, where you wake up in the morning, Allahu Akbar, and everyone comes out of their home and everyone's gathering at the mosque, and everyone's, you know, submitting under God, right? The tribe of Jericho coming together. And there's like that sense of community, despite the hardships faced in these places, that is uplifting. And, you know, in Jericho specifically, there is sacrifice, right? Sacrifice is, I think, at the forefront of the Islamic tradition and religion. When I consider Eid al-Adha, the day of sacrifice, this Islamic holiday, this celebration where hundreds of goats, or hundreds of sheep rather, I saw and witnessed slaughtered in the village, right? Hundreds of goats, you know. You would hear the cries of the goats, or the sheep being slaughtered. You know, you would walk around and you would smell the stench and see this blood-stained street, and everybody fasts, right? Everyone's making that sacrifice together. They're sacrificing the animal, they're fasting, making the sacrifice of fasting together as a community. And then at the end of the day, the community comes together and feasts, right? They feast. They don't just eat, they feast on the sheep. And, you know, I'll never forget that time period. You know, when I arrived in my village in Zambia, I was presented with a goat hanging from a tree. And this was the ultimate, like, sign of respect to have not even met this family and have not even met this man before, yet he has a goat prepared hanging from a tree for me to slaughter. I'm handed a knife, I slaughter the goat, and we feast together for a few days. And it reminds me of that time in Jericho. And, you know, there was something about that greeting, that sacrifice, and wow, what a beautiful day. I'm always eager to come out here and play and to see what comes to my mind and just speak. I think that coming to an elevated view and surrounding myself with beauty has been one of the greatest joys in recent days. You know, I've never felt so good, and I think starting my day off this way, it fuels me with this sense of abundance, like this feeling of abundance that's actually kind of hard to describe. However, when I return here, now what I can say is the water, it evokes memory. The water, there's some sort of like ancient truth in it, I feel. Like there's something about water and the way that it makes a human being feel, you know, where this river, the Schuylkill, has been here for a very, very long time. And it's near and dear to my heart and my childhood. And so maybe the memories of my life, my past experiences echo from the stream and makes me feel alive and one with the universe, with nature. You know, where we have a past, we have all these memories, you know, there is a future, but being grounded in the present moment, enjoying the sounds of these birds, you know, feeling the texture of the leaves and enjoying a nice view of the sunrise. I mean, look at that. Wow, that beautiful red hue, the blue clouds, the water. I mean, the simple pleasures in life, these are what fuel me with abundance. And yeah, maybe we should consider sacrifice more and figure out what that means, because I believe this to be just a critical notion and something worth pondering about as we live in this modern world of pleasure and abundance. Wow, this is sublime. Oh yeah. You see, I find that when I return to this river and I look out at the river and the water is moving, the water is changing, you know, I'm reminded that light too is always changing. You know, the way that light casts upon the surfaces, the way that light etches and gives shape to places, faces, and things. You know, the way that the clouds form in the sky. And what I love about this walk as an artist, as a photographer, is it reminds me about how endless and open this world is, right? There's so much to do, so much to see, so much to explore. But within the medium of photography, it too is endless. It too has no end, right? Where you can make the same, you cannot make the same photograph twice. I can return to this position. I can put my feet, you know, I should make, you know how they have the rocky feet at the center of the art museum steps? I got to make a Dante footprint. You got to stand here barefoot. This is where you respawn in the video game. And I can stand here, make a photo of this same vantage point. I can line up the lines on my composition in the same exact way every single day. And the photograph will never be the same. For photography is endless. And this world is open. And I'm just very grateful to be alive. Tinker with the world more in physical embodied reality, and embrace the spirit of play. Look at this beautiful this sunrise is one of the best I've seen recently, even though, you know, despite the clouds, this is sublime.